Will week 10 be a major letdown at the running back position, or are we going to get a lot of performances that we so desperately need to push into the fantasy playoffs? There are several guys that are just way too close to call right now, and if you're having trouble making lineup decisions, then my top 30 running backs is going to do exactly what you need. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? There are a lot of running backs with some good matchups this week, and then there are a lot of running backs with okay matchups this week, but you're trying to perfect your fantasy lineup. We can't make any mistakes going forward, and my top 30 running backs will hopefully help you make some of those decisions. And then I've got a few guys that are just on the outside looking in, and whether or not you should consider them for your lineups this week. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive right into my top 30 running back rankings. And back at the top this week is Christian McCaffrey. At number 1, Christian McCaffrey. Why? Because he is the league leader at the position right now, and maybe it is a little bit of a tougher matchup going up against Jacksonville, allowing the 3rd fewest rushing yards per game, but we know that CMC has a nose for the end zone. Josh Jacobs and Breece Hall are going to be playing against each other, and they're right next to each other in my rankings. Jacobs going up against the New York Jets, currently ranked 26 against the run, and he had 26 carries last week in a positive game script. And going up against a New York Jets offense that just can't move the ball down the field right now, a little renewed energy also on the defensive side of the ball in Las Vegas. If they're in a positive game script again, Jacobs could see a ton of touches. Breece Hall is getting a Las Vegas defense that ranks 30th against the run and allows the 4th most fantasy points to the position. Right now, the New York Jets have trouble pushing the ball down the field through the passing game. Zach Wilson still not getting the job done. Breece Hall is going to have to get the job done on the ground, and I definitely think he can. Minnesota might be allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points to the running back position, but Alvin Kamara is getting way too many touches right now to not have the upside of a top 5 running back. New Orleans at home, a strong defense going up against Josh Dobbs, who pulled off some magic last week, but still is very unfamiliar with the offense that he's in right now, could cause a lot of problems, and Alvin Kamara could see a ton of positive game script. The RB3 in fantasy football, Travis Etienne going up against San Francisco and Christian McCaffrey. That should be a fun game to watch as well. 4 running backs in the top 5 going up against each other. That's what we love to see in fantasy football. The San Francisco 49ers ranking 5th against the run right now, but Travis Etienne has such game-breaking speed and big playability out of the backfield that if he hits just one big play against this San Francisco defense, that could help make his entire day. Austin Ekeler will get the number 2 ranked run defense that's also allowing the 2nd fewest fantasy points to the running back position, and that's why I've got him a little bit lower than the consensus this week. Definitely still has top 6 ability given the amount of targets that he receives in the passing game. Hopefully this week he can get rid of those drops a little bit like he suffered from last week, pick up a few more yards through the air, score another touchdown this week. This should be a back and forth battle, and if Los Angeles can get into the red zone multiple times, Austin Ekeler should see at least one touchdown on the ground. We haven't been able to see Tony Pollard's upside all season long. And now going up against a New York Giants defense ranked 25th against the run, Tony Pollard definitely has the type of upside this week that we have been waiting to see, and absolutely could be a sell high candidate if he can ball out against the Giants. We'll be able to watch Jonathan Taylor from Germany this week going up against New England, and last week he took a firm grasp of the running back position in Indianapolis, and he is now the lead back, no doubt about it, a significant amount of more snaps than what Zach Moss saw, and he's being utilized more than Zach Moss right now. Going up against New England, currently ranked 11th against the run. We all know these overseas games can get a little weird, so expect Jonathan Taylor to see a heavy dosage on the ground. Aaron Jones put together a fantastic week, bounced back with a lot of usage, which is what Matt LaFleur said was going to happen, and he followed through with it. At least there's one NFL head coach that will tell us the truth, but Aaron Jones gets Pittsburgh this week, that's currently ranked 29th against the run. Absolutely love the upside for Aaron Jones this week. Could be a big playmaker on the ground and through the air, and should find the end zone, hopefully, at least once. Joe Mixon's going to bring some boomer bust touchdown upside to the running back position this week at number 10. Houston, they allow quite a bit of fantasy points to the running back position, but it's because they have some trouble stopping running backs in the passing game. However, they allow the 10th fewest rushing yards in the NFL. Joe Mixon definitely could put together a decent performance this week if he gets 5 to 6 targets and finds the end zone. Would be a low-end RB1, but for some reason he can't find the end zone, then we're looking maybe more towards the low RB2 end. Bijan Robinson's got a really good matchup going up against Arizona this week, and I'd be willing to bet that he gets a little bit more usage, or maybe Arthur Smith just throws us the middle finger and says, hey, screw all of you for questioning me all week long. I really could care less. It's really hard to say whether or not that could happen. For Bijan Robinson, he could go as high as probably RB4 for me this week, but he also could go as low as RB20. Saquon Barkley getting a ton of work right now and will again this week with Tommy DeVito starting at the quarterback position once again. Definitely going to see a lot of usage. Definitely going to see a lot of volume. But unfortunately for Barkley, how good could that volume be? How efficient could it be if Dallas just keys in on the run game and dares DeVito to try and beat him through the air? Tampa Bay currently allowing the 8th fewest rushing yards and 3rd fewest fantasy points to the running back position. Derrick Henry is just going to be on the outside looking in this week. Should still see a decent amount of volume, especially if Tennessee can push the ball down the field with Will Levis and open up some running lanes for Henry, but it's still going to bring down his upside. Ramondre Stevenson over the last 3 weeks has steadily seen a little bit of an uptick in his usage and what he is doing in that offense for New England. Last week, a big week with a big play, finally what we've been waiting for, and now he gets an Indianapolis defense currently ranked 24th against the run and allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the running back position. Ramondre Stevenson could absolutely have a banner week and another big week for those of you that have decided to hold on and not get rid of him quite yet. The Los Angeles Chargers allow the 8th most fantasy points to the running back position, but they allow the 6th fewest rushing yards in the NFL. You know what that means. Big plays through the air, and that's exactly what Jahmyr Gibbs brings to the running back position this week. The last time David Montgomery missed some time, he came back the next week with 26 carries and absolutely surprised all of us with that much work after being injured. But now that Jahmyr Gibbs has fully broken out and shown everybody what he can do from the position, we are looking at least a solid 50-50 split this week, and Detroit, going to need to move the ball against Los Angeles, will definitely keep Jahmyr Gibbs on the field and give him some plays to break off big gains. Kenneth Walker is going to get a very mediocre run defense in Washington this week, but he's still listed as questionable and still slightly banged up, and we have seen the effects on him over the last couple of weeks, and that's why I've got him lower. If he was fully healthy, Kenneth Walker would go as high as RB10 for me this week. But with less than 10 total fantasy points over the last 2 weeks, it's really tough for me to trust that Kenneth Walker is going to go out and get the volume that he'll need against Washington this week. If you own Kenneth Walker, you're probably really upset about what you've got in the last couple of weeks, and you're debating whether or not you'll be able to utilize him the rest of the season. But let's just hope that he gets healthy and then he's there for our playoff run. Rachaad White is at number 17 right now based on his receiving upside alone. He continues to be one of the most inefficient running backs in all of football on the ground, barely averaging 3 yards per carry and near the bottom of the league in almost every single efficiency category for running backs, including yards after contact, missed tackles per attempt. He just isn't doing a whole lot on the ground. So on a weekly basis, if he gives you 7 targets per game, that's fine because he's going to give you some really solid potential RB2 to low-end RB1 numbers. But if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's not going to go much higher than where he's at right now. He's going to need 7 to 8 targets per week to maintain this type of production. And while that is absolutely possible, just keep in mind that Rachaad White is probably closer to James White in terms of his fantasy scoring than he is a top tier RB1. David Montgomery coming back after a couple of week absence after injuring his ribs and going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. To get him going on the ground, it might be a little bit more difficult. I already mentioned the numbers when I talked about Jahmyr Gibbs, and that's why I've got Monty lower than Jahmyr Gibbs this week, but Monty definitely has that touchdown upside if they reach the red zone. D'Onta Foreman has taken making quite a few jumps for me now that we know officially Khalil Herbert will be out another week. So for D'Onta Foreman at RB19 this week, I definitely think that is a very safe ranking going up against Carolina. And given the matchup, he is a safe bet for me. Now, he does have the potential for a lot of upside, but Carolina is going to have to stay in negative game script and allow the Chicago Bears to just run the football. That could absolutely happen, though, given the amount of turnovers that Bryce Young has had recently. And then at that point, D'Onta Foreman could end up going a lot higher. James Cook is going to be super safe this week, going up against a Denver defense that allows the most fantasy points to the running back position and the most rushing yards on the season. Maybe he doesn't have RB1 upside anymore at this point, but that's okay. If you own him and you can get RB2 numbers every single week, that is exactly what we're looking for in our fantasy lineups right now, and you could have that this week. Green Bay struggles to stop the run, so Najee Harris is going to find himself as a low-end RB2 for me this week. Based on volume alone, he could be right here. If he can score a touchdown against Green Bay, he probably goes a little bit higher, maybe even up towards RB16 for us this week. But for Najee Harris, it's solely based on the touchdowns. Right before the bye, Javonte Williams saw a decent amount of workload, but it was in a positive game script against Kansas City. He may not find that against Buffalo this week, and if he does, if he's not more efficient than he was at the beginning of the season, then we're definitely going to have some problems reaching his potential. Brian Robinson against Seattle could end up being a really tough matchup this week. Could still see a decent amount of volume, but only probably 13 to 14 carries on the ground. And if he gets that, going higher than 60 yards may not be in the cards. We're hoping for touchdowns. Chuba Hubbard going up against Chicago. Chicago's defense has actually been pretty stern against the run this season. Chuba's going to need to make his presence known in the passing game tonight. If that can happen, then Chuba might have a pretty decent game. Why don't we give Bryce Young a few nice, easy dump-off targets to begin the game? Something high percentage to get his confidence back. Chuba Hubbard would really help out in that portion. Alexander Mattison has no more Cam Akers, but he gets New Orleans on the road this week. That's going to be a really tough matchup. All of the volume in the world will be there, but I just don't know how good it will be. Gus Edwards going up against Cleveland is going to be a tough matchup as well, and Gus Edwards was a little banged up with a toe issue last week. Not currently showing on the injury report, but how much work will Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell get this week to keep Gus Edwards healthy against a tough run defense? He's going to have to score a touchdown. Jaylen Warren going up against Green Bay may not get as many touches as what Najee Harris does this week, but he could be more efficient than Najee Harris, and if he can get about 5 receptions in the passing game, could end up having a better ceiling as well. Jerome Ford at number 28 going up against Baltimore will probably be pretty bad on the ground. I'm not expecting a high output from Jerome Ford on the ground this week. However, his work in the passing game definitely could be utilized by Cleveland going up against Baltimore, and if I were them, I would definitely try to get him at least 6 targets this week. Tyler Algier going up against Arizona only has touchdown potential for me. If you're looking to start him for high upside, I would not. We're putting him in banking on a touchdown. Kareem Hunt's going to be a little bit lower than Jerome Ford for me because I don't think he's going to get the work in the passing game, but if Cleveland can get into the red zone and get near the goal line, Kareem Hunt will be the touchdown guy. All right, now I have just a few guys that are just on the outside looking in. James Conner, we have no idea if he will even play this week. He is a late Sunday afternoon game. If you have early game guys that you need to get into your lineup, I would absolutely do that. Devin Singletary looks like he's going to be without Dameon Pierce this week against Cincinnati, but Devin Singletary hasn't done nearly enough for me to even consider starting him unless I'm in a really bad position. Zach Moss is going to get New England, and like we talked about with Jonathan Taylor already, Zach Moss was basically non-efficient and non-used in the game plan last week. This week against New England, I'm not looking at a ton of upside. Tyjae Spears going up against Tampa Bay, he would definitely need to make his presence felt in the passing game, and probably will see more snaps than Derrick Henry again this week, but once again, more snaps don't equal more fantasy points. Zach Charbonnet going up against Washington, will be keeping an eye on this one based solely off Kenneth Walker's health. Miles Sanders against Chicago. There is an opportunity for us to see maybe a little bit more Miles Sanders this week than what we've seen as of recent, but Chuba Hubbard seems to be the guy right now. Antonio Gibson against Seattle. If Washington gets into negative game script, then Antonio Gibson could see anywhere from 40 to 50 receiving yards. It looked like they tried to get him a little bit more involved in the passing game last week, and because of that, he wasn't that bad of a fantasy option in PPR leagues. Keaton Mitchell at number 38, because every everyone's going to be asking about him this week, but it is a tough matchup. As of right now, he is still the RB3 on this team. He is vying to take Justice Hill's RB2 spot. If he can crank off a big play or two this week against Cleveland, he absolutely will probably cement himself as the RB2 going forward. But as far as this matchup goes, if you're trying to start him, you're probably going to be disappointed. All right, there you have it, Headliner Nation, my top 30 running backs, and then a few guys just on the outside looking in that if you're dealing with buys or injuries, you may have to consider. I appreciate everybody tuning into this episode. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you turn on the bell notifications. Anytime we drop content, anytime we go live, you'll know about it right away. And of course, leave me some comments down below. Let me know of a couple of guys that maybe you saw towards the bottom of my rankings that you think might have some high RB2 upside this week. But for now, I'm gonna get out of here. Headliner Nation, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.